It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Lee Matthew Goldberg. Hi, Lee. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me, Douglas.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Looking over your bio here, you've written, how many novels have you written now?
So I've had 4 that are published, and then next year I have 3 more coming out.
Okay.
So that'll be 7.
You're also a screenplay writer?
Yeah, I'm trying to move into a screenwriting avenue. So one of my books is I wrote a script for, and I'm in sort of final negotiations for it to be optioned.
Oh, well, that's great. Okay. I've had...
keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah. I've had other people on that have gone the other way, that were started out as screenplay writers, and, you know, they were frustrated they couldn't get anything optioned, and finally they gave up and converted all their screenplays to novels and did better that way. So, I don't know. I guess it's luck of the draw. Yeah,
I mean, for me also, I like working on a script in between novels. It's almost like a palate cleanse in a sense.
What is your mindset different though when you do a screenplay as opposed to a novel? Because I know I've written a couple of screenplays myself. I've never written a novel, but it's like understatement. In novel, you've got to describe everything to the nth degree. Yeah. And in screenplay, you don't. And they're very fussy about not doing that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was told you want as much white on the page as possible with a screenplay. And it's eliminating all that description and just focusing on really just like dialogue and action. So it's difficult. I feel like I'm more immersed in a project when I'm writing it as a novel, and I'm more distanced from it when it's a screenplay. It also has to follow like so many beats, so it's under 100 pages, and there's just rules that as a novel you're a lot more free with.
One thing that I think is frustrating, though, is that you always feel like when you're writing a screenplay that people aren't even going to get the story because the story's in your head, and all you're doing is writing dialogue and then setting a scene, and it's like, but apparently that's up to the director and the actors to get that right, not you. Is that correct? I mean, that's what's been explained to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately it's thought of in Hollywood like the screenwriter is the least important person in the movie, even though they're the ones creating the movie. Because sure, it's the director's, vision of it. It's how the actors say the lines. I think a top screenwriter has some wiggle room in terms of their presence on set, but the average one, you pass it over and then it gets changed in multiple iterations, and maybe resembles the screenplay that you started when it goes up on the screen.
Yeah, I think people like James Cameron pretty much have the run of the show, but he's like one in a bazillion, Him and maybe George Lucas, and there's probably, you could name it on one hand, the ones that have total control of their work.
Like an Aaron Sorkin, who began as a screenwriter and like just directed that movie that came out on Netflix the other day. So I think if you're really good in your career, you could like move to kind of a side career in Hollywood. So who knows? Maybe one day I'll direct a film that'll be in my future.
What's the title of your new novel here? Because I'm reading this as Alaskan Gold Rush. Is that the actual title?
No, so the title is The Ancestor. And it's about a man who wakes up in the Alaskan wilderness with amnesia and believes he was a prospector from the Alaskan Gold Rush, meaning he was frozen in time for over a century, if that's true.
Oh, okay. That sounds interesting. A couple of months ago, I had Rick Ness on the show, interviewed him from the Discovery Channel Gold Rush show. Do you know that show?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So he gave me all the lessons about gold mining because I had no idea. And we talked about how it was for the Alaskan prospectors back in the late 1800s, and it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the synopsis of your book. This guy is a time traveler? Or how does it work?
Well, not quite. So he wakes up in the Alaskan wilderness, and he sees another man hunting nearby, and the man looks exactly like him. So he follows that man back to his home, sees the man's wife and child, and all of a sudden a flood of memories rush back of his own wife and child, except they're from the late 1800s, the Alaskan Gold Rush era. And so he believes that this man is his descendant, that he's his ancestor, and that somehow he's been able to be frozen in time, and has to kind of discover the meaning of why. And then when he remembers where he potentially found the gold, he seeks out to re-find it again in the Alaskan wilderness.
Oh, okay. So it's not a parallel universe thing.
No, not at all. No. But I never give a complete answer as to the why. So maybe that would be for a sequel, or I'm working on it as a television show, like as a pilot. So it opens it for like future seasons, maybe.
Okay. How much research did you do on the Alaskan Gold Rush? The historical
a lot.
Research?
This probably was the most research I did for a book. I did a lot of research just in general about Alaska because it takes place in a fictional town, probably closest to Nome, so very northern.
Okay.
And then a ton of books about the Klondike and the Alaskan Gold Rush. And there was an amazing documentary called Frozen in Time about the city Dawson City, which is the hub of the Alaskan Gold Rush, where they had archival footage of that era that literally was filmed during that time. So that was super, super helpful and amazing. Just kind of see it, for myself.
Have you been to Alaska?
So I have not. I was planning on doing a book tour after the book got released in Alaska. Obviously, COVID sidelined those plans. But I didn't want to actually kind of color my view of it. I wanted it to come out of imagination rather than go to Alaska and then write the book. So hopefully maybe next year I get to actually travel and see it.
Do you have any desire to have been one of those guys? I mean, is that a fantasy at all?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. The Alaskan Gold Rush was very different than the California one. It was a lot more treacherous. The terrain that the prospectors were traveling through was, super perilous. There were bandits in the area. But the adventure kind of aspect of it, I think if you're able to survive it and you're able to find gold, would have just been amazing.
Well, and never mind that it was 100 degrees colder. That would definitely do it.
Yeah, a lot of it literally just froze to death.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. So in your research, do you happen to know if more gold was discovered in Alaska or in California at that time?
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. And you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
I think from recollection, it was like more gold in pockets in Alaska. So like those that hit big, hit very big. But there was more in California because it was over a longer period of time. I would have to check my research on that, but I think that was the case.
What do they refer to that as? A vein?
Like tapping into it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like coal because they call it a vein of coal.
Yeah, that I don't know. But they would sort of at first look for the silt, and then from there, if they saw that, it was like the runoff of gold. That would clue them in that nearby there was like sort of a power source of that gold that they could go seek. So when they would, like pan in the river, if you have those little like kind of speckles of that may be gold, maybe not gold, that kind of led them to a bigger source.
Again, I'm trying to remember what Rick said but the process is so different because they use heavy machinery and
right. Yeah. No, I mean there it was using a pan literally, right. And
standing in the stream,
just kind of digging and plugging away and taking a guesstimate whether or not that area was. I mean, in Alaska, it was such specific areas too that unfortunately by the time a lot of the prospectors reached it, the gold was cleaned out. So it was such a small window, and even that town, Dawson City, which became kind of the hub, you would sit down on a seat there and there would be gold dust on the seat. And then 2 years later, it was a ghost town and nobody even lived there. So the area just got kind of just completely all the gold grabbed, and then they all fled basically. And then the people who came afterwards were, left to fight over the scrubs.
Now they didn't work in the winter, did they? They couldn't, right?
Yeah. No, they did.
They did. Okay.
Well, a lot of the traveling was in the winter, so maybe if they set out in the winter, then they could get there by the spring, because a lot of times it was literally just like hiking up mountains and down mountains. Like there wasn't, they weren't cars then, there wasn't modes of transportation to get them there. Sometimes they would go, by boat to like certain areas. So like for my character, he takes sort of like a river cruise through like some Alaskan spot, but none of those are where the gold is. It leaves him off at a place where he still has to go a very, very far distance through a lot of terrain hiking to get to the actual gold. And he's traveling in the wintertime, and I think it's for that reason. Let me get there by spring to kind of maximize, the soil in the area to dig through.
And they had to use pack animals, right? Like donkeys, which half of them would freeze to death or starve to death or something like that. I mean, just brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I have my guy, he has a horse, so he falls in with a Native American village, and one of the guides there goes with him, sort of as a trade for whatever gold they find would be brought back to the village, kind of split 50-50. So he's able to procure 2 horses, one for him and one for the guide, which allows him to, do a chunk of it not by foot. But one of the horses dies along the way, and it doesn't turn out initially how he planned it.
Oh, okay. You want to talk about your script, the one that might be optioned? You want to tell us about that or no?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
So the script is for my second novel, which is called The Mentor, and it's about a book editor at a high-profile publishing house who's contacted by his favorite professor. He graduated about 10 years ago, The professor is writing a book that he's been working on forever. He's very excited for the book editor to read it. The book editor reads it, and it's not only terribly written, it's really, really messed up and disturbing, and kind of reminds him of a cold case from when they were at school together, and a girl he dated went missing. So he starts to think that maybe the professor had something to do, and it's almost like his true crime confession.
Well, that does sound interesting, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So right now I have producers that are interested, and we're actually waiting on my publisher to see if they will sign off on the option. So it's at a good place. It's just a question of whether the publisher feels like they'll get enough from it.
Okay, so you wrote the screenplay from your novel on this one, on The Mentor, yeah?
Yeah, we had people attached when the book came out 3 years ago. There was a producer, there was a director, there was a screenwriter, and somebody else wrote a script, and it was terrible, and then nobody was interested. So I was like, well, I'm just going to do it myself and see what could happen, because then at least if nothing happens, I tried everything that I could rather than somebody else ruined it for me.
It's funny you say that.
How that goes.
That has been the biggest inspiration for many, many people to create something or invent something because somebody else screwed it up and they said, you know what, I can do better than that. And they get going.
I think I learned a lot from it, and how I'll proceed related to sort of Hollywood in the future with my own books.
Now, I got a question for you on this. This is your first one, I assume, right? That may be optioned?
Yes.
How precious are you going to be about it? Because I know the process. They pay you, and then it's at their discretion to sort of keep you on as an advisor or not. Or they could say, here's your check, thank you, have a nice day. How upset are you going to be if by the time the movie comes out it resembles nothing to what you had in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be so happy it's a movie and it's getting made. But this one, because it's not only my book and my script, I'm a little bit more of an integral process. So they love the script, they love the book, and as of now, there aren't major things in terms of that could change if other producers come on board, and who knows? But I have a feeling that this would stay closer to the script I have than the average thing. It also will be a relatively low budget movie, like an under $2 million project. So we're not talking like massive amounts of like ego, and I mean, I don't know, maybe that's naive.
No, I don't think so. Under $2 million is sort of on the line between indie and what they call sub studios or a spin-off studio, like what's the Disney one? Well, there's Lionsgate, and then there's some of them that do
like a Miramax or Dimension or
the ones
days,
right, the ones that do romantic comedies, they do dramas, because the big ones are pretty much reserved these days for Star Wars, James Bond, and Marvel Comics.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I was told that this would be like for like a video on demand. Also, now that's just sort of the world that we're in.
Oh yeah.
Like at post-corona, like what are movies going to look like beyond those tent poles in terms of what we'll see on a screen? Like, will we ever see a comedy on a movie screen again? Because they tend to be lower budget, or will they go straight to streaming? But this one I was 100% told would be video on demand, and that's because it would be about a $1.5 million budget. So again, I hope because of all that it stays pretty close to like the vision that I have for it, and then hopefully we just get a really great director attached, and then I think that would be sort of the first big step.
Do you want to be in it?
Sure, yeah. Why not? I would love sort of like a Stephen King cameo where he's, like the bus driver or something like that. I think that would be cool.
Have you done any acting?
I used to, yeah. In college, I did a bunch of acting and theater. So it's something I'm pretty comfortable with, but not on that level. Like, that would be very new to me.
You don't want to star in it?
I mean, I would, but I don't think anybody's like running for me to do that.
Do you fit the character?
I could play the book editor, yes. The villain, I think, is out of my realm of talent. Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to do that.
Well, it sounds interesting. I'll keep it in mind, and if I see it pop up, it probably is. It's probably going to go if this all gets done. It'll be like a Netflix, Roku kind of film, yeah.
Netflix would be like the ultimate goal, or just any sort of video on demand. But yeah, they're having a meeting about it this week, so hopefully it goes in my favor.
Oh, well, best of luck with it. Last question, and then we'll wrap this up. Mm-hmm. I saw in your bio, let's see, you were nominated for 2018 Prix du Polar. What is that?
Mm-hmm. So that's the Booksellers Award in France. The book we were just talking about, The Mentor, came out in France as well that year, and they have a bunch of different awards. So it was the award from the booksellers, but I lost to some very big French writer that I don't think I stood a chance against.
How did you get nominated there? Your book came out in France, presumably? Yeah,
so a different publisher bought the French rights out there, Hugo Thriller. They do amazing thriller novels in France. And it had an amazing translator. The translator did all of Elmore Leonard's books. So he did an excellent job. And it did better there than it did in America. So I think that's how it got noticed. They publicized it really well. And it just came out recently again in like a new edition, like a pocket, like a mass market. It came out there. So hopefully one of my other ones gets picked up in France as well.
I did want to ask you one more question. Did
Sure.
Did COVID affect your, I know you said it screwed up your book tour, but aside from that, the actual writing, are you doing more writing, less writing, or the same writing because of lockdowns and things?
At the beginning of COVID, when it was so bad here in New York City, like March, April, May, June, there was just nothing else to do. There was a month where I really didn't even go outside. Like, it was just so intense here. So I was about halfway through a new novel, and I finished it those months. So I actually think it helped because I don't think I would have been able to write it as fast. The last 2 months, I left the city for a little bit. I got a place on the beach, and I've kind of just been taking off from writing. But I'm starting a new project that I'm getting back into. So I don't think I was really that affected by it like a lot of people were in that way.
Because some people I've talked to, it helped them, but other people it hurt them because as a writer, you know that half of the process is staring out the window. And, and when you're kind of forced into the situation where, well, now I have to write because I can't do whatever else they do. A lot of them told me they suffered from mental block. They just couldn't force themselves to get it going. So
for me, it was like an escape. I mean, it was, the days where it was like almost 1,000 people were dying here. It was a way to just like shut off that world almost. So I think it really saved me during that really bad month. That month I wrote a lot. But I could totally understand how for some people it was completely opposite. And I know of other writers that really weren't able to write at all during this and still aren't.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on your process and your mental set and
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my guest is Lee Matthew Goldberg. His new book is called The Ancestor. It is available now?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have a website that you want to give out? People come check you out?
Yes, it's my name, LeeMatthewGoldberg.com, and you can find out about all my books and anything that I'm sort of working on now.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Nice talking to you. Best of luck, and I hope The Mentor becomes a film. I'd love to see it. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Douglas, and thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun to do.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie music.